bit of a video tutorial in how we're going to look at animations in Unity for 2D. So you should have something that looks a bit like this kind of scene here. So you've got a character. Let's just keep play on here for our Tokoi game. Just wait for that to do its thing. So you can see down here, I got my character. Kind of just moves around. And we can jump like so. But it's not massively interesting at the moment. I got my sort of floating lava thing here. And you should have some traps. So my lava, I'm going to take you back to the checkpoint. Okay, so to add some dynamic content to this, we really want to be able to have some sort of animation for our character. And we can do this using Unity's built-in animation process. It's quite nice and quite easy to get to grips with. But we'll need to just make some changes to our script, so I'll talk you through some of those parts to it. But first off, what we need to do is actually create an animation. Now, if we look in our art, in our platformer pack here, in our assets, we actually have some assets for walking. So we go to P1, walking. We have a sprite sheet for it, but we're not going to use a sprite sheet for this. You can do if you want to, but what I'm going to do is just use the sprites that have been created that we changed for this set of PNGs. So if we grab all of those, select these like so, and just grab those. See they come up in this side screen here. We can see this kind of movement of our character to carry the character there. Now if we grab all of those, nice thing about Unity is that what I can do is grab those. If I drop them onto our player, so I've just picked them up and I drop them onto our player, it shows that because you've got multiple sprites that you actually want to create an animation. And that's fantastic, it makes life easy for us. So I want to put this into a specific place. So I want to put it into animation. So I'm going to create a new animation. This one's I'm going to call walk. So I save that there. It chugs away. So if I go to my animations, I've got two things here. I have an animation, which is this kind of symbol here. I also have a controller, which is our player, which is a controller. Now, for any animation, it's we need some kind of controller. We can use the animations and control them through code, through script, but we can also use this animation controller to be able to move it around. It's like a state machine, which you'll look at a lot more throughout this course. So we want to be able to see these. So we're going to open up a couple of windows here to be able to see these. So if we click up here on this little tab at the top there, add a tab, and we want to add animation, ION. There, also what we want to, if you click on window, is go to animator. And in animator you'll see that we have a couple of things. I'm going to move these around a little bit. So you can see that you've got any state. We've got an entry requirement, which is kind of entry into our animation. And we already have walk in here, which is the one that we just created down there. So this is our animator. This is our whole process. We have animation. So we click back onto our player there. We can see that we've got a walk here, just there. So it gives us all of our information about it. So if we click down on our sprite, you can see all of our sprite elements to our animation. And we click the play here, you can see how it moves through and the rate at which it moves. And so we've got frames, etc. through here. So what we can do, if we want to, we can adapt this. We can add in frames into this. We can change frames. We can remove frames if we want to. So we can adapt our animation in here. So that's great. In our animator, this, as I say, is like a state machine. So what this does is actually allows us to move from one state to another. So at the moment we have walk. So we have the ability to, we have an animation for walk. We don't have any ability at the moment to actually show that, to display that, but we have walk. Now, what we want is a couple of other actual animations. So we want to be able to idle, or to show that we've got a state for idle, and we also want a jump animation. Now actually within this we don't have many sprites for these types of animation, and I'll sort of say those in inverted commas. So what we're going to do is actually just put in a couple of states for these. Now, quite an easy way to do this, if we go back to animation, we click on this little tab up here and we can create a new clip. So again, in our animation folder, I'm going to create idle, save that there. So if we come back down to our platformer, pack, our player, now I'm going to drop in standing for idle, like so. Now you could have a number of different sort of sprites in here if you wanted to. So say that we wanted to grab another one from walk, for instance, so that when it was idling, it actually looked like it was sort of moving back and forth. So say we wanted to grab that in, place it in like so. We could actually have them kind of shuffling like that. We could have it kind of a movement, sort of shuffling. Might look like he's actually walking. But what I'm going to do is actually just remove those for now, because all I want to do, have our character do, is just stand still, like so. Want another one as well, so create a new clip. This one's going to be jump. And I placed that in the wrong place, that's fine. I'm going to grab that, just drag that over to animations. So you can see that I've got jump, and then same way, player, and you see that we've got a little jump one in there. And I am going to add in just a little sort of movement into here, so when he jumps we get one before. Did I replace that? I think I might have replaced that actually. So let's go back, player, let's just drop that one in there. That's the beginning, that along, so have a kind of a jump. So let's just move it. So we have our jump. So each of these frames will be played through an animation. Okay, so we now have, if we look back in our animator, we now have a number of animations. So we want to have some kind of structure for moving between them. So as I say, this is like a state machine. So what we have is our entry, and then we're into walk and moving between them. So what this does is that you transition from one point to another. So you move from one to another. So we'd move from idle to walk to jump to idle to walk, dependent upon certain conditions, certain parameters actually, which we'll get to in a second. So to be able to do that, we need to make transitions. So if you right click on walk, we can make a transition, and we move this to idle. And we need to have a condition, so make transition to jump. But equally, we need to have some kind of transition from idle to walk. So we do the same again, make a transition to walk. And from jump, we make to walk. And equally, we need to know when we are moving from jump to actually idle, so when we're still. So we have, in this case, make a transition from jump to idle. And also when we're stood still, we might just jump. So we're going to make a transition to jump. So this is our state. This is how it will appear. Okay, so what we now need to look to do is add some parameters to these. So when we're walking, we can add, if we come up to here, we can add some parameters. Now these are parameters that as they change, they will alter these transitions. So when we're actually idle, we will then change a parameter and it will change the transition and move our character from idle to walk. Equally, it may move it back from walk to idle, and equally it may move our character from walking to jumping. So we need to know how this is occurring, something that's going to happen. So if we click on parameters, we can add parameters to it, and we've got 4 different types that we can add in terms of parameters. The first one we add is a float, and we're going to add this as being speed. Now this is a parameter we're going to get from our movement left and right when we use a key, and it's going to be a speed value, and we're just going to use this as a float, and we're going to get that from an input. We're actually going to get that by using a script. Another we're going to get is a boolean, and we're going to say is, if I can spell, is jumping. So we have 2 parameters that we can use for this, which is great. So if we click on our transition from our idle to our walk, we can actually see that we have conditions here that need to be met to move from idle to walking. We click on the plus sign here, and you can see instantly it brings up some of the conditions that we've met, or conditions based on parameters that we placed here. So what we're going to say is, okay, if the speed of our character is greater than a value, then we will change from idle to walking. And in this instance, what we want to do is set it to be 0.1. So a very small value, but greater than 0, essentially. Going the other way, we set the same condition, but if it is less than 0.1, it will move back to idle. For our jump condition here, we click on our transition, and we're going to say you move from idle to jumping. We click down and we say is jumping. So if it's true, we move from idle to jump, and we click the other parameter, the other transition I should say, and we say is jumping is false, and it'll move back to idle. So we need to do the same for walking. So click on the transition, moving to jumping. So if jumping is true, we move to jump, and equally going back, if jumping is false, then we move back to walking. So then we have this sort of triangular relationship between all of them. We also need to just go through some of these and change some of the settings just to make the transitions clean. So we don't set any exit time. Duration is 0 as well. You can see this down here. Same for this as well. Has no exit time. Duration will be 0. Equally here, no exit time. Duration 0. And just do it across all of them. Duration 0. Exit time. Duration 0. And no exit time. And duration 0. Basically what this allows us to do is make the transitions really crisp. You can set it so the durations, there kind of is a sort of transitional offset or either between them, or a duration of the transition is longer, so you kind of get a movement across. We don't want that, we just want it to flick from one thing to another. So that's why we've set it like that. So that's how we got it set up. So we can see these animations that we've got. So if we go back actually to our game, at the moment we've got no movement, but we can see that what we have is that currently our player is in idle, so nothing's going on. If we set the speed to 1, we can see then that the movement is into walk. So if we go back, we can see down here actually into the walking animation. We click on jump, they're into the jumping, so they're moving up. So if I was to click in here, you can see that would be, and we got that kind of wobble actually because we did that sort of jumping, which maybe is not so great, but we got a sort of wobbly jumping movement as they jump. And you can see it's running super quick because we've only got 2 frames in there, so it's running 60 frames per second between those 2. So we set that to 0 and we turn that off, it goes back to idle. We just click that and it's jumping again, and we get our wobbly movement, which would be indicated by our jump. So there, you can see how these run. And you can see the processing there. So we need to now do that with some kind of programmatical way by doing it actually in a script. So, okay, we're going to do that with the script. So what you need to do is go to your script that you created previously, which is your player movement. I've already got that open, so I'm just going to pull that up, like so. Okay, so I've commented some things out, so you should have a script that looks something similar to this. You may or may not have, but something similar. Something similar to this. So I've commented some things out, some things that we're going to add. So let's just pop back to Unity for a second. You'll see when we click on the player that when we added, I just need to move that across. When we added our animation, it actually added a animator to our player here. Now this allows us to access all the animations in here through our script. So let's just drop back here. So what we can do is actually access our animator. So what we need to do is get a few class variables which are going to help us. So first off, we need to access our animator. So I've got here a player animator, which is of the type animator there, and we're going to initialize that, or we'll set it up as a class variable up here. And then we need 2 of those 2 variables which are going to relate to the parameters that we set within our animator. So we can say that this is these are variables that relate to parameters. So we have, when we set at the beginning, we're going to actually initialize them to be 0 and false. So there's nothing going on there. So we've just set those up. So then the first thing that we need to do is in our start method is actually to initialize the our player animator. So we're just going to get the component of our animator here, which allows us to initialize it just when it starts to actually get that. Get that to go away. There we go. Okay, so then in fixed update, so we're going to use fixed update rather than update, just because it runs at a particular time, it runs standard time. So what we're going to do is actually use our is grounded. We want to know whether the player has actually jumped or not, and we can do this by actually getting the is grounded. So when it's actually grounded has jumped, so if that movement up and down when our player has jumped, this then becomes false. So we want it to be the inverse of that. So just what we're doing is saying is grounded is the opposite of, is jumping is the opposite of is grounded. So we're going to set that, which is quite nice. So then what we're going to do is set a value in our player. So player animator, I'm going to do this, just type this out even though I've got it there. Player animator dot, and you've got some set values. So we can set a boolean, set a float, set an integer, etc. Set a trigger. So what you need to do is make sure though that the same string value that you use here are the same string values that you use here. They have to be the same. They are case sensitive, so they have to be the same. So we're going to set the boolean of is jumping here to the same as our value, which is our boolean here as is jumping. Actually, let's just change this so it makes it a little bit more understandable. So rather than just call it jumped. There we go. So then you can see that that is a bit more understandable in this way. So our value in Unity, our parameter is jumping, we're going to set to jumped. So every time that is grounded it becomes false, we set to jumped to being true, and then we just place that value in player animator. So that's the first one, that's our first parameter that we've set. So we're setting that in fixed update. The next one is our float value, so as our movement. Now we can do this when we get our axis. So again, our horizontal axis. Now if you remember that this is a either -1 or 1 when we press on this get axis. So when we get axis here, it's -1 or 1 when we press left or right, -1 or 1. So if we want to set movement speed. If we were just to get this as a value, this would be no good if we want to set it to be greater than 0. That's no good. So what we need to do is use this function here, or this method here, which is a maths method, which sets it always to be either as 0 or to 1 of whatever the value is here. So it actually just removes the minus, so it's always a plus value, which is what we want it to be. So it's always a plus value because we don't want a negative value. We're only looking between 0 and 1, so we're looking greater than. So that's all we want it to be, because that's how it's going to work with our parameter setting. So we use this math f absolute value of that. So that's the setting that we use there, and that's in this if statement here, because we're just going to check that, or we're just going to update that every time we press a key or press our horizontal keys. So then we update it. Same thing again. We use our player.animator, and what we're going to do is set a float, and the float relates to speed. Speed is here. That's our speed value. So we set speed here, and we relate that to movement speed. And that's all we need to do. That's it. That's all we need to do. So we can save this. So that's saved. We'll just save that. So I'll show you. We'll be just yeah, so it's already saved. So we go back to our Unity, and that chugs away. Chug, chug, chug. So if we now hit play on this, see our character down here, As I move left and right, you can see that it actually goes into walking. Walk, 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 walk. Press jump, and we have that little wobbly jump. It's quite crazy. But we now can see that we have animations. So I'm pressing my keys and walking, but when I'm stood still, it's idle. And you can see how it relates to our values up here. So as I walk, I press keys, it's moving back and forth, it's walking. As I jump, it jumps and gets those values. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much.